History is written by the victors. We've all heard that before. But sometimes, history isn't written with grand statements or heroic tales. Sometimes, history is written through silence. For centuries, a powerful and convenient story shaped the way South Africa understood its past. It was a story repeated in textbooks, colonial records, and political arguments. It was simply and it was devastatingly effective. The story went like this. The land was empty. When the first European settlers arrived at the Cape in 1652, the southern tip of Africa was a vast, untouched wilderness, largely unoccupied and waiting to be settled. This narrative, often called the myth of an empty land or terra nullius, served a clear purpose. It painted colonization not as an invasion, but as a benign act of filling a void. It justified the seizure of land by claiming there was no one there to claim it first. But what if that story was never true? Archaeological evidence and rich oral traditions tell a completely different story. Long before 1652, Southern Africa was a vibrant and complex tapestry of human life. The land was not empty. It was full. It was full of communities, bustling with trade, and crisscrossed by ancient routes, connecting peoples across the subcontinent. Let's travel back in time. For thousands of years, the Sun hunter-gatherers and Khoikhoi herders inhabited these lands. They were the first peoples, with deep spiritual connections to the environment and sophisticated social structures. Their stunning rock art, found scattered across the country, is a silent testament to their long and rich history. They weren't just wandering nomads. They were the original custodians of this land, with established territories and a profound understanding of its ecosystems. And they were not alone. From around the 3rd century AD, waves of Bantu-speaking farmers began migrating southwards. They brought with them the knowledge of ironworking and agriculture, transforming the landscape. They established settled villages, cultivated crops like sorghum and millet, and raised cattle. By the year 1000, powerful kingdoms and states were beginning to emerge. Think of the kingdom of Mapungubwe in the Limpopo Valley, a sophisticated society that traded gold and ivory with merchants from as far away as China and India. Its famous golden rhino, discovered in a royal grave, is a symbol of a prosperous and complex civilization that flourished centuries before European arrival. Mapungubwe was succeeded by other great states, like Great Zimbabwe and the Kingdom of Putua, whose influence stretched deep into modern-day South Africa. When the Dutch East India Company established its refreshment station at the Cape, they didn't step into a vacuum. They stepped into a world that was already ancient, populated, and organized. They encountered the Khoikhoi, who grazed their vast herds of cattle and sheep in the very pastures the settlers coveted. Further inland, powerful Swana and Nguni-speaking chiefdoms controlled vast territories, with intricate political systems and trade networks. The idea of an empty land was a deliberate fiction, a tool to erase the presence of millions of people from their own history and from their own land. This myth had catastrophic consequences. It provided the moral and legal justification for dispossession and conquest. By denying the existence of established societies, colonial powers could claim ownership of the land and its resources. The silence in the history books was a weapon, rendering entire civilizations invisible to make way for a new colonial order. So, the next time you hear the story of an empty, untouched wilderness, remember the truth. The land was alive. It was filled with the voices of kings and herders, farmers and artists. It echoed with the footsteps of traders on ancient paths and the sounds of communities thriving for millennia. Uncovering this real history is not about rewriting the past. It's about correcting a deliberate silence. It's about restoring the humanity and the history of the millions of people who were here all along. This was a logistical move, a business decision designed to protect valuable cargo and crew from the ravages of scurvy and starvation. There were no initial instructions for colonization, no grand design for a new Dutch empire at the southern tip of Africa. It was meant to be a small footprint, a functional outpost on the edge of a vast, unknown continent. But as we'll see, good intentions, especially when mixed with commercial ambition, can pave the way for something entirely different. The seeds of a colony, and the myth that would justify it, were being planted, whether anyone knew it yet or not. From its humble beginnings as a vegetable garden, the Cape Station began to transform. The demand for supplies was constant, and the VOC's own gardens couldn't always keep up. The company needed more land, more produce, and a reliable source of meat. This led to a pivotal decision. The VOC began releasing some of its employees from their contracts, allowing them to start their own farms. These newly independent farmers, known as freeburgers, were granted land to cultivate crops and raise livestock. On the surface, it seemed like a win-win. The company got its supplies without the overhead, and the burgers got a chance at a new life. But there was a fundamental problem with this plan. A problem that the official records often glossed over. Where did this land come from? It wasn't created out of thin air. It was land that was already in use. The expansion wasn't into a vacuum. It was an encroachment. The Cape was far from empty. For centuries, long before any European ship had rounded the continent, this land was home to vibrant and established societies. The most prominent groups in the immediate vicinity of the Cape were the Khoikhoi. They were skilled pastoralists. Their wealth and way of life centered around vast herds of cattle and sheep. They moved seasonally across the landscape, following ancient grazing routes that ensured the sustainability of the pastures. Their social structures were complex, organized into various clans and chiefs. The land, for the Khoikhoi, was not a commodity to be owned and fenced, but a shared resource, essential for the survival of their community and their livestock. Then there were the San, the hunter-gatherer peoples, whose ancestry in southern Africa stretches back tens of thousands of years. Their connection to the land was profoundly intimate. They possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of the local flora and fauna, living in small, mobile groups that harmonized with the natural environment. Their rock art, found in caves and shelters across the region, stands as a timeless testament to their long history and spiritual connection to the world around them. These were not unused lands. They were the homelands of the Khoikhoi and the San, rich with history, culture, and life. So, you have Dutch settlers needing land and resources, and you have the Khoikhoi and San peoples already living there, using that very same land. Conflict was inevitable. Initially, there was some trade. The Dutch wanted cattle, and the Khoikhoi were often willing to trade, but on their own terms. However, as the settlement grew and the burgers' farms expanded, tensions escalated dramatically. Disputes over grazing rights, water sources, and land ownership became commonplace. The Dutch worldview, rooted in concepts of private property and fenced-off land, clashed directly with the Khoikhoi's communal, pastoralist lifestyle. What a Dutch farmer saw as an unclaimed field, perfect for planting wheat, a Khoikhoi chief saw as essential seasonal grazing for his clan's herds. The Dutch settlers, backed by the military power of the VOC, began to seize land with increasing aggression. Skirmishes turned into wars. The Khoikhoi, defending their ancestral lands, fought back bravely, but they were outmatched by European firearms. On top of the violent dispossession, devastating smallpox epidemics, introduced by the Europeans, swept through the Khoikhoi communities, decimating their population and shattering their social structures. Within just a few generations, the independent Khoikhoi, chiefdoms of the Cape, were largely destroyed. Their people either killed, driven away, or forced into servitude on the very farms that now occupied their land. This is the critical point where history and ideology merge. How do you justify this process? How do you take land that is clearly inhabited and claim it as your own? You create a story. You build a narrative that legitimizes your actions, both to yourselves and to the outside world. And the most powerful narrative was the myth of the empty land, or terra nullius. European writers, travelers, and officials began to portray Southern Africa as a vast, underutilized wilderness. They described the indigenous peoples not as societies with their own systems of governance and land use, but as primitive, nomadic wanderers with no real claim to the territory. The San were depicted as wild bushmen, barely human, while the Khoikhoi were dismissed as lazy and unreliable, incapable of making proper use of the land. This rhetoric was incredibly effective. If the land wasn't being properly farmed in the European style, with permanent structures and fences, then it was considered empty. If the people didn't have written title deeds, then they were considered to have no rights. This narrative deliberately erased the complex realities of Khoikhoi pastoralism and San hunter-gatherer economies. It was a calculated act of dehumanization, a tool of colonialism that reframed violent dispossession as a noble act of bringing civilization to a vacant wilderness. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a justification. As the 18th and 19th centuries progressed, this myth became even more crucial. The Dutch-speaking settlers, now known as Boers or Afrikaners, pushed further and further into the interior, seeking new grazing lands and independence from colonial authorities. This expansion, known as the Great Trek, brought them into contact and conflict with powerful Bantu-speaking kingdoms, such as the Xhosa, the Zulu, and the Sotho. Once again, the myth of the empty land was adapted and deployed. A key element of this later version of the myth centered on the Mafik, or the crushing. This was a period of immense social and political upheaval in the early 19th century, marked by warfare and mass migrations among the Bantu-speaking peoples, largely initiated by the expansion of the Zulu kingdom under Shaka. The Mafeking was a real and devastating historical event. It did cause widespread disruption and depopulated certain areas for a time. However, Boer trekkers, and later apartheid-era historians, seized upon this. They argued that they had arrived in the interior to find a land that had already been emptied by these black-on-black wars. They presented themselves as entering a void, conveniently ignoring the fact that the land wasn't empty, but in a state of flux. People were displaced, not gone forever. Kingdoms were reforming. This version of the myth cleverly positioned the settlers as innocent beneficiaries of a situation the indigenous people had created themselves, completely ignoring the settlers' own role in the escalating conflicts over land and resources. It was a sophisticated evolution of the original myth, tailored to justify a new phase of colonial expansion. The myth of the empty land wasn't just a historical footnote. It became state policy. In the 20th century, the apartheid government enshrined this idea in law and education. School textbooks taught generations of white South Africans that their ancestors had arrived in a largely unoccupied land, and that black Africans were, in fact, later migrants to the region, arriving at roughly the same time. This was a complete fabrication, but it was a politically essential one. It provided the moral and historical justification for the entire apartheid system. If black people had no prior claim to the land, then the government was justified in designating over 80% of the country for the white minority. The infamous Land Acts of 1913 and 1936, which were the legal cornerstones of segregation, were built upon this ideological foundation. The myths stripped black South Africans of their history, their heritage, and their legitimate claim to their ancestral homes. It transformed them into foreigners in their own country, rationalizing a system of brutal oppression and inequality. The consequences of this are still being felt today, as South Africa continues to grapple with the complex and emotional issue of land reform and restitution. So, why does debunking this myth still matter so much? Because history is not just about the past. It shapes our present and our future. Acknowledging that the land was never empty is a crucial step in recognizing the humanity and history of the people who were dispossessed. It refutes the colonial logic that some ways of life are superior to others, and that land is only valuable when it's exploited in a certain way. It allows for a more honest conversation about the roots of inequality in South Africa and around the world. As this same terra nullius logic was used to justify colonization from Australia to the Americas, understanding this myth helps us see how powerful narratives can be used to justify injustice. It's a reminder to always question the official story, to look for the voices that have been silenced, and to understand that no land is ever truly empty. It's always filled with the stories, the histories, and the lives of the people who call it home. Most history books start this region's story in the 1600s, but that's like starting a movie 3/4 of the way through. The real beginnings are far older, richer, and more fascinating than you might imagine. So, get ready to travel back in time, over 20,000 years, to meet the first peoples of this incredible land. Our journey begins with the Sand People. These are the original inhabitants, the earliest modern humans to call Southern Africa home. Their history here isn't just a few centuries old. It stretches back into the mists of time for at least 20,000 years, and some evidence suggests even further. The San were masters of survival, living as highly skilled hunter-gatherers. They didn't just survive in this often harsh environment. They thrivet. Their understanding of the natural world was encyclopedic. They knew every plant, its properties, whether it was food, medicine, or poison. They could track animals for days, reading the land like an open book. This wasn't a primitive existence. It was a sophisticated and sustainable way of life, perfectly in tune with the rhythms of nature. They lived in small, mobile family groups, moving with the seasons and the availability of resources. This mobility was key to their success, ensuring they never overexploited one area. But the most breathtaking legacy the San left behind is their art. Across southern Africa, from the rugged Drakensberg Mountains to the caves of the Cedarberg, they painted and engraved on rock faces. These aren't just simple pictures of animals and people. They are windows into the sun's spiritual world, a complex and deeply symbolic universe. Many of these artworks depict trance dances, which were central to their religious beliefs. In these rituals, shamans would enter a spiritual state to heal the sick, control the weather, and communicate with the spirit world. The art is filled with powerful imagery. Elongated figures, therianthropes, that are part human and part animal, and geometric patterns that likely represent supernatural energy. The eland, a large antelope, is a particularly common and powerful symbol, representing a source of spiritual power. These rock art galleries are some of the most extensive and oldest in the world, a testament to a rich cultural and spiritual life that endured for millennia. They are a silent, beautiful library of ancient beliefs. Now, let's fast forward a bit to about 2,000 years ago. A new group of people began to appear on the southern African landscape. The Khoikhoi, while related to the San, sharing similar languages with distinctive click consonants, the Khoikhoi brought a revolutionary new way of life. They were pastoralists. This means their society was built around herding livestock. Instead of just hunting animals, they owned and managed large herds of fat-tailed sheep and, most importantly, cattle. Cattle weren't just a source of food. They were the measure of a person's wealth, status, and power. The more cattle you had, the more influential you were. This shift from hunting to herding changed everything. It allowed for larger, more settled communities and a different social structure. The Khoikhoi weren't constantly on the move in the same way as the San. They would graze their herds in a specific area, and while they were still mobile, their movements were dictated by the needs of their animals for fresh pasture and water. This new economy based on livestock led to a different kind of society. The Khoikhoi were organized into much larger groups than the San. Their primary social unit was the clan, a group of related families. Several clans would often band together to form a chiefdom, led by the wealthiest and most powerful chief. Leadership was based on wealth and cattle and the ability to command respect and loyalty. This structure was more hierarchical than the egalitarian San societies. Disputes could arise over grazing rights or cattle, but there were also established systems for resolving them. Their lives revolved around their herds. They were expert stock farmers, and their entire culture, from their social standing to their daily routines, was intertwined with the well-being of their sheep and cattle. This pastoralist lifestyle would dominate large parts of the Western and Southern Cape for the next 2,000 years. One of the most remarkable aspects of this period was the interconnectedness of these different groups. Southern Africa was not a collection of isolated communities. It was a continent crisscrossed by extensive trade networks. The Khoikhoi, with their mobile herds, were natural traders. They moved across vast distances, connecting different regions and peoples. They traded livestock, milk, and hides. In exchange, they might receive things they couldn't produce themselves. For example, they traded with the San, perhaps exchanging pottery or livestock for honey, wild plants, or the right to hunt in certain territories. It wasn't always a peaceful relationship. There was conflict over resources, but there was also cooperation, intermarriage, and a constant exchange of goods, ideas, and culture. Further inland, other groups were also part of this bustling network. Ironworking, Bantu-speaking farmers were migrating into the northern and eastern parts of what is now South Africa. They brought with them skills in agriculture, growing crops like sorghum and millet, and in metallurgy, smelting iron to make tools and weapons. The Khoikhoi would trade with these farming communities, exchanging their cattle for iron goods and grains. This created a dynamic and complex economic web. Goods could travel hundreds, even thousands of kilometers. For example, decorative seashells from the Indian Ocean coast have been found at archaeological sites deep in the interior, far from the sea. This shows that these weren't simple, isolated society. They were part of a vibrant, pre-colonial African world of trade and interaction that was thriving long before the arrival of Europeans. So, When the first Portuguese sailors rounded the Cape in the late 1400s, and when the Dutch established their settlement in 1652, they didn't arrive in an empty land. They stepped into a world that was already ancient, with a complex history stretching back tens of thousands of years. They encountered the San, with their deep spiritual connection to the land, and the Khoikhoi, with their powerful chiefdoms and vast herds of cattle. This was a land of hunters, herders, farmers, and traders, a mosaic of peoples with rich cultures and established social and economic systems. Understanding this deep history is crucial. It challenges the colonial narrative of an empty or primitive land and reveals a southern Africa that was dynamic, sophisticated, and deeply connected long before the modern era began. It's a history that deserves to be known and celebrated. Have you ever pictured ancient southern Africa? What comes to mind? For many, the image is one of vast, untamed landscapes, perhaps sparsely populated by hunter-gatherer groups. But what if I told you this picture is incomplete? That this region was a cradle of innovation, a hub of bustling trade, and the birthplace of powerful, sophisticated kingdoms. Today, we're journeying back in time to uncover the incredible story of how these great southern African states came to be. We'll explore the migrations that reshaped the continent, the technologies that fueled growth, and the majestic cities that rose from the savannah. Forget the outdated narratives. This is the real, dynamic history of a region bursting with culture, long before the first European ships ever appeared on the horizon. So, get ready to have your perspective shifted. Let's rewind the clock. For millennia, Southern Africa was home to diverse groups of people, including the Khoi and San peoples. They were expert hunter-gatherers and pastoralists, possessing a deep, intimate knowledge of the land. Their rock art, found scattered across the region, gives us a breathtaking glimpse into their spiritual and social worlds, a vibrant record of life stretching back thousands of years. They were not living in isolation. Archaeological evidence shows they were part of ancient networks, trading goods like shells and salt over long distances. So, the stage was already set. This was not an empty land waiting for history to begin. History was already well underway. And then, beginning around 300 CE, a major transformation occurred. Bantu-speaking farmers began migrating into southern Africa. They brought ironworking, agriculture, and new forms of political organization. Villages spread across the eastern and northern regions. Over time, these societies developed into powerful kingdoms. The land was not empty. It was alive with culture, trade, and innovation. This wasn't a sudden invasion, but a gradual process of movement, interaction, and settlement that unfolded over centuries. These newcomers didn't just replace the existing populations. They intermarried, exchanged ideas, and created new, hybrid cultures. The key to this transformation was technology. The Bantu-speaking migrants were skilled farmers, cultivating crops like sorghum and millet, which were perfectly suited to the African climate. This agricultural surplus allowed for something revolutionary. Larger, permanent settlements. People no longer had to move constantly in search of food, but the real game changer was iron. Imagine the advantage. Iron tools made clearing land for farming vastly more efficient. Iron weapons offered superior defense and hunting capabilities. Blacksmiths became respected and crucial members of society, their forges burning at the heart of this new world. This technological package agriculture, and iron created a powerful engine for population growth and social complexity. As villages grew into towns, new social structures began to emerge. The basic unit was often the family homestead, but these were grouped into larger communities led by chiefs or headmen. A chief's power wasn't absolute. It often depended on his ability to manage resources, settle disputes, and perform important spiritual rituals to ensure the land's fertility and the community's well-being. Wealth wasn't just about land, it was about people and, crucially, cattle. Cattle were a walking bank account, source of milk, a symbol of status, and the currency for everything from marriage alliances to political tribute. The more cattle a chief controlled, the more followers he could attract, and the more power he wielded. This system laid the foundation for the rise of larger, more centralized states. One of the earliest examples of this growing complexity is the kingdom of Mapungubwe, which flourished in the Limpopo River Valley around the 11th century. Mapungubwe is incredible. It's southern Africa's first known kingdom to feature a distinct, class-based society. How do we know? Archaeology at Mapungubwe. The king and his royal court lived in seclusion on the flat-top summit, physically separated from the commoners who lived down below. This was a clear statement of power and divine status. The king wasn't just a political leader. He was a sacred ruler who mediated between his people and the spiritual world. The discovery of a golden rhinoceros, a golden scepter, and thousands of gold beads in the royal graves at Mapungubwe proves the kingdom's immense wealth and sophisticated craftsmanship. Where did this wealth come from? Trade. Mapungubwe was perfectly positioned to control the trade routes that connected the interior of southern Africa with the Indian Ocean coast. From the interior came ivory, gold, and animal hides. In return, from traders on the coast, who were part of a vast network stretching to Arabia, India, and even China, came glass beads, cloth, and ceramics. The wealth generated from this trade allowed the rulers of Mapungubwe to consolidate their power, fund their lavish lifestyles, and build a state that controlled a vast territory. But like all great powers, Mapungubwe's time eventually came to an end, likely due to climate change that made the area less suitable for farming. Its decline, however, paved the way for an even larger and more famous successor. Enter the kingdom of Great Zimbabwe. When people think of ancient southern African civilizations, this is often the one that comes to mind, and for good reason. Flourishing from about the 13th to the 15th centuries, its capital city is one of the most astonishing archaeological sites in the world. The word Zimbabwe itself means great houses of stone, and it's a fitting name. The city's ruins are dominated by the Great Enclosure, a massive circular wall built with over 1 million expertly cut granite blocks, all assembled without any mortars. Inside were numerous stone buildings and towers, a testament to the kingdom's power, organization, and architectural genius. This wasn't just a fort. It was a royal capital, a religious center, and a bustling city that housed up to 18,000 people. Like Mapungubwe before it, the power of Great Zimbabwe was built on a combination of cattle wealth and control of the gold trade. The surrounding region was rich in gold, and the rulers of Zimbabwe monopolized its extraction and trade. This incredible wealth funded the construction of the capital and supported a powerful elite. The famous soapstone birds found at the site, which had become a national symbol of modern Zimbabwe, likely represented royal ancestors and underscored the king's spiritual authority. For centuries, colonial historians refused to believe that indigenous Africans could have built such a magnificent structure, attributing it to everyone from the Queen of Sheba to Phoenicians. But archaeology has proven definitively and without a doubt, Great Zimbabwe was a purely African achievement, a pinnacle of indigenous innovation and power. While Great Zimbabwe was the largest, it was not the only powerful kingdom of its time. To the southwest, in what is now Botswana, the kingdom of Butwa arose, known for its distinctive style of stone walling. Further north, in the region between the Zambezi and Congo rivers, the Luba and Lunda empires were taking shape. These kingdoms developed complex political systems, with intricate webs of tribute, loyalty, and provincial governors. They created sophisticated art, particularly their famous wooden sculptures and memory boards, which were used by court historians to recount royal genealogies and histories. Each of these states had its own unique culture and history, but they were all part of this broader pattern of growth, centralization, and long-distance trade that was transforming the southern half of the continent. They were interconnected, competing and collaborating, creating a dynamic political landscape. So what can we learn from this epic history? First, the story of southern Africa is one of constant innovation and adaptation. From the early adoption of iron to the construction of monumental stone cities, these societies were always changing and growing. Second, this was a deeply connected world. The gold from Zimbabwe that ended up in a European cathedral, or the Chinese porcelain found in an African king's court, tells a story of a truly global network of exchange that existed centuries before we usually imagine it. And finally, and most importantly, this history demolishes the myth of a static, uneventful African past. The rise of these kingdoms demonstrates a legacy of political genius, artistic brilliance, an economic power that is as impressive as that of any other ancient civilization in the world. This is a history that deserves to be known, celebrated, and shared. Imagine a time long before colonial ships reached the shores of southern Africa, a time when a powerful kingdom rose, its wealth echoing across continents, its kings ruling from a sacred hill. This isn't a fantasy novel. This is the true story of the kingdom of Mapungubwe, a testament to a magnificent and often overlooked chapter of African history. Join us as we journey back 1,000 years to uncover the secrets of this golden kingdom. Before the towering stone walls of Great Zimbabwe captured the world's imagination, another power was taking root in the fertile Limpopo River Valley. Between the years 1075 and 1228, the Mapungubwe kingdom flourished, becoming the very first state-level society in southern Africa. This wasn't just a collection of villages. It was a complex, organized society with a clear social hierarchy, a thriving economy, and a deep spiritual life. The name itself, Mapungubwe, is thought to mean Hill of the Jackals, but for the people who lived there, it was the center of their world. At the heart of this kingdom was Mapungubwe Hill, a flat-topped sandstone outcrop that rises dramatically from the surrounding landscape. This wasn't just any hill, it was a sacred space, reserved exclusively for the king and the royal elite. By living atop this natural fortress, the rulers were physically separated from their subjects, reinforcing their elevated status. It was a powerful symbol. Their authority came from a higher place, both literally and spiritually. Imagine the king, adorned in gold, looking down from the summit, overseeing his domain. The air up there would have been different, filled with a sense of power and divine right. This separation of leadership was a groundbreaking social innovation in the region, a model that would be followed by later kingdoms, including the famous Great Zimbabwe. Down below, at the foot of the hill, lay a bustling settlement. This was the hub of daily life, home to an estimated 5,000 people. Farmers cultivated the rich floodplains, growing sorghum and millet. Herders managed vast herds of cattle, which were a primary source of wealth and status. But what truly set Mapungubwe apart were its skilled artisans and international traders. The town was a vibrant center of industry and commerce. Blacksmiths forged iron tools and weapons. Potters crafted intricate ceramics, and other specialists worked with ivory, bone, and copper. This was a society of specialization, where skill and trade were the engines of prosperity. The most breathtaking evidence of Mapungubwe's wealth and global connections lies in the treasures unearthed from the royal graves on the sacred hill. In 1932, a local farmer and his son were led to the site, uncovering a royal burial ground that would rewrite history. The most iconic artifact discovered is the golden rhinoceros. This small, delicate figurine, crafted from gold foil tacked onto a wooden core, is a masterpiece of ancient artistry. It speaks volumes about the kingdom's metallurgical skills and the symbolic importance of the rhino, an animal associated with leadership and power. But the rhino was just the beginning. Archaeologists also found a golden scepter, a golden bowl, and thousands of gold beads. Think about that for a moment. This was a kingdom in southern Africa 1,000 years ago, producing and valuing gold on a massive scale. It completely shatters the myth that sophisticated civilizations didn't exist in the region before European arrival. This was a society that understood wealth, power, and the art of expressing it. And Mapungubwe's influence didn't stop at its borders. The kingdom was a key player in the Indian Ocean trade network, a bustling maritime highway that connected Africa, the Middle East, India, and even China. How do we know this? The proof is in the artifacts found alongside the gold. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of glass beads, which chemical analysis has traced all the way back to India. These colorful beads were a form of currency and a status symbol. They also found fragments of Chinese celadon porcelain from the Song dynasty. Imagine a trader's journey. Gold and ivory from the heart of southern Africa, traveling hundreds of miles to coastal ports like Chibuin, in modern-day Mozambique, where they were exchanged for exotic goods from the other side of the world. These tiny fragments of pottery and glass beads tell a grand story of a connected, globalized world, long before we thought it existed. Mapungubwe's economic power was built on controlling this lucrative trade. They traded ivory, a highly prized commodity, and gold, mined from the rich reefs of the surrounding region. In return, they received goods that cemented their status and power. This trade network not only brought wealth, but also ideas, influencing the culture and development of the entire region. The kingdom was a cosmopolitan center, a crossroads of African and overseas cultures. So, what happened to this great kingdom? Around the year 1220, the climate began to change. A period of cooling and drying, known as the Little Ice Age, made farming in the Limpopo Valley more difficult. The rains became less reliable, and the agricultural base that supported the large population began to collapse. As resources grew scarce, power began to shift northwards, to an area with more favorable conditions. This shift gave rise to the next great power in the region, Great Zimbabwe. Many of the social and architectural ideas pioneered at Mapungubwe, such as the sacred royal enclosure and the use of stone masonry, were adopted and expanded upon at Great Zimbabwe. Inti Sensei Mapungubwe wasn't just a kingdom that disappeared. It was the foundation upon which its famous successor was built. It was the crucial first step in a long legacy of state building in southern Africa. For centuries, the story of Mapungubwe was largely forgotten, its significance overshadowed by colonial narratives that sought to deny Africa's complex past. The discovery of its treasures was even suppressed by the apartheid government in South Africa, as it contradicted their ideology of an empty land. But today, Mapungubwe is celebrated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its immense cultural and historical importance. It stands as a powerful symbol of pre-colonial African achievement, a reminder of the innovation, artistry, and global connections that defined this continent long ago. The Golden Kingdom of Mapungubwe challenges us to rethink our understanding of history. It proves that sophisticated, wealthy, and globally connected societies thrived in southern Africa a millennium ago. The golden rhino, the Indian glass beads, and the sacred hill are not just artifacts. They are the enduring legacy of a proud and powerful people. They tell a story that deserves to be heard. A story of an African golden age. Look closely at this object. A small, golden rhinoceros, crafted with incredible skill nearly 1,000 years ago. Now, look at this. Delicate glass beads from India, and this. Fragments of celadon, porcelain from distant China. These aren't just museum pieces. They're clues. Found together in the heart of southern Africa, they reveal a story that turns much of what we thought we knew about this continent on its head. For centuries, the popular narrative has painted a picture of an isolated, disconnected Africa, waiting to be discovered. But these objects, and countless others like them, tell a different tale. A tale of a vibrant, interconnected world where southern Africa wasn't on the periphery, but was a key player in a global network of trade, culture, and ideas. Long before the first European ships ever appeared on the horizon. This is the story of a forgotten superpower, a kingdom built on gold, and its astonishing connections to the rest of the world. Welcome to Mapungubwe. Before we journey back in time, let's set the scene. Imagine the landscape of modern-day South Africa, near the borders of Botswana and Zimbabwe. Here, where the Shash and Limpopo rivers meet, a flat-topped sandstone hill rises from the savanna. This is Mapungubwe Hill. For about 70 years, from roughly 1220 to 1298. This was the heart of the most powerful kingdom in southern Africa. But the story of its rise began much earlier, with the people who learned to master this challenging but resource-rich environment. Early communities in this region, known as the K2 culture, were skilled farmers and herders. They settled near the fertile floodplains and began to prosper. And as they prospered, their society grew more complex. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And they were trading. Archaeological evidence shows a bustling local economy. They traded salt, cattle, and grain, but they also had access to something far more valuable: ivory. Elephants roamed these lands in vast numbers, and their tusks were a highly prized commodity. This local trade network slowly but surely began to reach further and further afield. Goods were moving, ideas were being exchanged, and wealth was starting to accumulate. This growing prosperity led to the development of a more stratified society. Some people became wealthier and more powerful than others. This was the foundation upon which the great kingdom of Mapungubwe would be built. Around the year 1220, a significant shift happened. The center of power moved from the nearby settlement of K2 to the top of Mapungubwe Hill itself. This wasn't just a change of address. It was a profound social and political statement. For the first time in southern Africa, we see a clear physical separation between the rulers and the common people. The king and his royal court lived in seclusion atop the hill, a natural fortress that overlooked their domain. The rest of the population, numbering around 5,000 people, lived in the valley below. This separation of the elite on the hill from the commoners below is a classic sign of a state-level society, a kingdom. And what fueled this kingdom? What paid for this complex society? This royal court, this power? Gold. Deep within the earth of this region lay rich veins of gold. The people of Mapungubwe and its surrounding territories became expert miners and goldsmiths. They developed sophisticated techniques to extract the precious metal and then worked it into beautiful objects. Beads, foil, and intricate sculptures. The most famous of these is, of course, the golden rhinoceros, discovered in a royal grave on Mapungubwe Hill. This tiny masterpiece, made from gold foil tacked onto a wooden core, is a symbol of the kingdom's wealth and artistic achievement. But the gold of Mapungubwe wasn't just for local adornment. It was destined for a much longer journey. This is where the story gets truly global. The gold, along with ivory and other goods like animal skins, began to flow out of the interior. It traveled along a complex network of ancient trading routes, carried by porters on foot for hundreds of miles. These paths, worn by generations of traders, led east, towards the shimmering waters of the Indian Ocean. Think of it as a great river of commerce, with Mapungubwe as its source. Tributaries of trade from across the region fed into it, carrying their own unique products. The destination for this incredible overland journey was a series of bustling port cities dotted along the Swahili coast, places like Kilwa, Sofala, and Zanzibar. These cities were cosmopolitan melting pots, home to African, Arab, Persian, and Indian merchants. Here, the gold and ivory from Mapungubwe were exchanged for goods from across the known world. Imagine the scene. A merchant from Mapungubwe arrives at the port of Sofala. He unloads his precious cargo of gold dust and ivory tusks. In the marketplace, he is surrounded by a dizzying array of foreign luxuries. He trades his gold for vibrant glass beads from India, beautiful and durable porcelain bowls from Song Dynasty China, and fine cotton textiles from Persia. These weren't just the Chinese porcelain, for example, was highly valued for its beauty and practicality, a status symbol for the Mapungubwe elite. The glass beads were not only decorative, but also a form of currency, their colors and patterns holding specific values. The merchant would then begin the long journey home, his caravan now laden with these exotic goods. When these items arrived back at Mapungubwe, they were distributed among the royalty and the elite. Finding a piece of a Chinese bowl or an Indian bead in a royal burial on Mapungubwe Hill is not just an archaeological curiosity. It is concrete, irrefutable proof of this vast trade network. It tells us that the king who was buried there was part of a global conversation. He may never have seen the ocean, let alone China, but his life was directly connected to these distant lands through the power of trade. This was the engine of the Indian Ocean world economy, and Southern Africa was not a bystander. It was a vital supplier of one of the world's most sought-after commodities, gold. This global connection fundamentally shaped Mapungubwe society. The control of trade, especially the lucrative gold trade, was the source of the king's power and wealth. It allowed him to maintain his court, reward his followers, and project his authority. The social structure, with the elite living separately on the hill, was a direct result of this accumulated wealth. It created a society of haves and have-nots, defined by access to these prestigious foreign goods. This wasn't an isolated, uncontacted kingdom. It was a sophisticated, worldly state, deeply embedded in the international commerce of the 13th century. Its fortunes rose and fell, not just on local harvests, but on the demand for gold in markets thousands of miles away. The story of Mapungubwe forces us to redraw our mental maps of the past. TDF, a dark continent waiting for European discovery, simply falls apart in the face of this evidence. Here was a powerful African kingdom, controlling a resource vital to the world economy and trading on its own terms with the great civilizations of the East. So what happened to this great kingdom? By about 1290, Mapungubwe's power began to wane. The reasons are likely complex. Climate change may have played a role, with a shift to a cooler, drier period, making agriculture in the Limpopo Valley more difficult. It's also likely that the center of trade and gold production began to shift further north to a new power that was on the rise. Great Zimbabwe. Great Zimbabwe would inherit and expand upon the trading networks pioneered by Mapungubwe, becoming an even larger and more powerful empire. The people of Mapungubwe gradually dispersed. The Great Hill was abandoned, and its story was slowly buried by the sands of time. For centuries, its existence was known only through local oral traditions. It wasn't until the 1930s that archaeologists rediscovered the site and began to unearth its secrets, including its now famous golden treasures. The rediscovery of Mapungubwe was a bombshell, but its story was suppressed for decades by the apartheid regime in South Africa. The evidence of a powerful, sophisticated, and globally connected indigenous African kingdom directly contradicted their racist ideology. But history cannot be silenced forever. Today, Mapungubwe is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its immense cultural and historical importance. The golden rhinoceros is a national symbol, a powerful reminder of South Africa's deep and complex pre-colonial past. The story of Mapungubwe is more than just a history lesson. It's a fundamental correction to the historical record. It shows us that Africa has always been a part of the global story, a continent of innovation, commerce, and complex societies. It reminds us that history is often written by the powerful, and that we must always be willing to dig deeper, to listen to the stories told by objects, and to challenge the narratives we've been given. The gold of Mapungubwe didn't just travel to the coast. It traveled across the world, connecting southern Africa to the great economic and cultural currents of its time. It's a legacy of connection, a testament to a vibrant, globalized African past, good as the heart of a powerful empire for centuries. Today, we're journeying back in time to southern Africa to uncover the secrets of one of history's most impressive and mysterious ancient metropolises, Great Zimbabwe. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're fascinated by lost civilizations and ancient wonders, you've come to the right place. Today, we're peeling back the layers of history to explore the extraordinary stone city of Great Zimbabwe. What made it so great? Who were the people who built it, and what led to its eventual decline? Stick around, because the story is absolutely captivating. Our story begins around the 11th century on a high plateau in what is now modern-day Zimbabwe. This wasn't just some random spot. The location was strategic, situated between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers, offering fertile land for farming and grazing, and, crucially, access to rich gold fields. It was here that a new power began to emerge, one that would leave an indelible mark on the landscape and the history of the entire region. When we talk about Great Zimbabwe, the first thing that comes to mind is its incredible architecture. This was, at its height, the largest stone-built city in all of sub-Saharan Africa. Forget mud huts and temporary structures. We're talking about monumental stone walls, some reaching over 11 meters high and 5 meters thick. And here's the most mind-blowing part. These massive, curving walls were constructed without any mortars. No cement, no clay, nothing to bind the stones together. It was all done using a technique called dry stone walling. The builders, who were ancestors of the modern Shona people, meticulously selected and shaped granite blocks, fitting them together so perfectly that they have stood firm for nearly 1,000 years. This level of craftsmanship is just staggering. It speaks to an incredible understanding of engineering, physics, and geometry. The site of Great Zimbabwe isn't just one single structure. It's a sprawling complex covering nearly 1,800 acres. It's generally divided into three main areas: the hill complex, the Great Enclosure, and the valley ruins. Let's start at the top, with the hill complex. Perched on a steep granite hill, this is believed to be the oldest part of the city, likely serving as the spiritual and political center for the rulers. Imagine the king looking down from this vantage point, his authority symbolized by his elevated position over the city below. The passages here are narrow and winding, leading to various enclosures and altars. It was a place of power, a royal palace, and a sacred temple all in one. Then, down in the valley, we have the most iconic structure of all, The Great Enclosure. This is the largest single ancient structure south of the Sahara Desert. Its massive outer wall is over 250 meters in circumference. Walking alongside it, you can't help but feel a sense of awe. What was its purpose? For a long time, historians debated it. Was it a fortress? A palace? A temple? The current consensus is that it was likely a royal residence or a prestigious center for public ceremonies and rituals. It wasn't built for defense. The walls have no arrow slits or battlements. Instead, they were built to impress, to project power and prestige. Inside the Great Enclosure is another famous feature, the conical tower. It stands about 10 meters tall and has a base diameter of 5.5 meters. It's a solid structure, not a hollow building. Its exact purpose remains one of Great Zimbabwe's biggest mysteries. Some theories suggest it represents a granary, symbolizing the king's control over the food supply and thus his ability to provide for his people. Others propose it had a more symbolic, perhaps phallic, meaning related to fertility and royal power. Whatever its true function, it stands as a silent, enigmatic testament to the city's complex belief system. Surrounding these two main areas are the Valley Ruins, a series of smaller stone enclosures that housed the city's elite and a large portion of its population. At its peak in the 14th and 15th centuries, it's estimated that up to 20,000 people lived within the orbit of Great Zimbabwe. This wasn't just a small settlement, it was a bustling, thriving urban center. So, who were these people? And how did they build such a wealthy and powerful society? The civilization of Great Zimbabwe was a complex and hierarchical one. At the top was the king, a ruler who held both political and religious authority. Below him were governors, nobles, and a class of wealthy traders. Then came the craftspeople, the skilled masons, potters, weavers, and metallurgists, and finally, the farmers and herders who formed the backbone of the economy. And what an economy it was. The wealth of Great Zimbabwe was built on two main pillars: cattle and gold. Cattle were more than just food. They were a symbol of wealth and status. The more cattle you owned, the more powerful you were. The large enclosures were likely used to manage these vast herds, which belonged to the king. But it was gold that connected Great Zimbabwe to the rest of the world. The surrounding lands were rich in gold, and the people of Great Zimbabwe became expert miners and traders. They traded this precious metal, along with ivory, with merchants on the Swahili coast, cities like Kilwa and Sofala. From there, the gold of Zimbabwe made its way across the Indian Ocean to Arabia, India, and even as far as China. Archaeological finds at the site paint a vivid picture of this global trade network. They've uncovered Chinese porcelain, Persian pottery, and glass beads from India. This wasn't an isolated kingdom. It was a cosmopolitan hub, a key player in the medieval world economy. The influence of Great Zimbabwe wasn't confined to its city walls. It was the capital of a vast empire that stretched across much of modern-day Zimbabwe, Botswana, Mozambique, and South Africa. Smaller stone settlements, built in a similar style, I've found throughout this entire region, showing the extent of the empire's political and cultural reach. They were provincial centers, paying tribute to the great capital. One of the most iconic artifacts discovered at Great Zimbabwe are the 8 soapstone birds. These beautifully carved birds, each perched atop a stone monolith, were found in the hill complex. They are thought to be emblems of royalty, perhaps representing different kings or lineages. The bird, which is believed to be a Batelor eagle or an African fish eagle, is a powerful symbol in Shona culture, acting as a messenger between the living and the spirit world. Today, a representation of one of these birds is the national emblem of modern Zimbabwe, a powerful link between the nation's past and its present. So, if Great Zimbabwe was so powerful, so wealthy, and so advanced, what happened to it? Why was this magnificent city abandoned by the late 15th century? There isn't one single, simple answer. Instead, it was likely a combination of factors. One major theory points to environmental degradation. A population of up to 20,000 people would have put immense pressure on the local resources. Over a few centuries, this could have led to deforestation, soil exhaustion, and overgrazing, making it difficult to sustain such a large population. Climate change may have also played a role. with shifts in rainfall patterns affecting agriculture. Another key factor was the shift in trade routes. By the late 15th century, the gold trade may have moved further north, diminishing Great Zimbabwe's economic power. New, competing states like the Mutapa Kingdom rose to prominence, drawing wealth and influence away from the old capital, with its economic and political foundation weakening. The city's elite and its people likely began to migrate to more promising areas. By the time the Portuguese arrived on the coast in the early 16th century, Great Zimbabwe was already in decline and largely abandoned. The city slowly fell into ruin, its story fading into legend. For centuries, its origins were shrouded in mystery. When European explorers and colonists encountered the ruins in the 19th century, many refused to believe that indigenous Africans could have built such a sophisticated structure. They came up with all sorts of outlandish theories, attributing the city to everyone from the Phoenicians to the Queen of Sheba. These colonial-era theories were, of course, completely baseless and rooted in racism. They denied the history and achievements of the African people. It wasn't until the 20th century, thanks to the dedicated work of archaeologists like David Randall Mickover and Gertrude Kat, that the truth was firmly established. Through meticulous excavation and research, they proved conclusively that Great Zimbabwe was a product of a local, indigenous African civilization. Today, Great Zimbabwe stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a powerful symbol of Africa's rich and complex pre-colonial history. It's a testament to the ingenuity, artistry, and organizational skills of its builders. It challenges outdated narratives and reminds us that great civilizations have risen and fallen all over the world, not just in Europe or the Middle East. It's a source of immense pride for the people of Zimbabwe and an inspiration for all of us. The story of Great Zimbabwe is a reminder that history is full of incredible chapters that are still being uncovered. It's a story of power, wealth, art, and a profound connection to the land, a stone city that speaks volumes without saying a word. Have you ever heard of a city so grand, so monumental, that when outsiders stumbled upon it, they refused to believe who built it? This isn't a fantasy tale. This is the real story of Great Zimbabwe, a powerful testament to a lost African empire, and a shocking example of history being deliberately Imagine this. You're an explorer in the late 19th century, trekking through the heart of southern Africa. You push through the savannah and suddenly, you see it. Sprawling stone walls, some over 11 meters high, stretching for nearly a kilometer. A conical tower built with breathtaking precision, and massive enclosures, all constructed from millions of granite blocks, perfectly fitted together without a single drop of mortars. This is Great Zimbabwe. Your mind is blown. This is a feat of engineering that would be impressive anywhere in the world. But here, in what you've been told is an uncivilized land, it seems impossible. The first European accounts from Portuguese traders in the 16th century were filled with awe. They called it a fortress of wondrous size, built with no lime or mortars. But as the colonial era ramped up, that sense of wonder curdled into denial. By the time prospectors and adventurers like Karl Marx arrived in the 1870s, a new narrative was taking shape. Marx, a German explorer, took one look at the sophisticated architecture and declared it couldn't possibly be the work of local Africans. It was too complex, too grand. The people living there, the Shona, were in his view incapable of such a feat. So, if the Africans didn't build it, who did? This question kicked off a century-long historical whodunit, fueled by colonial prejudice. The theories that emerged were wild, to say the least. Marx himself was convinced he had found the land of Ophir, the biblical city from which King Solomon received shipments of gold, ivory, and peacocks. He proposed that the Queen of Sheba must have built a palace here. This fantastical idea captured the European imagination. It was romantic, it was biblical, and most importantly, it wasn't African. Others pointed to the Phoenicians, the ancient seafaring merchants from the Mediterranean. They spun tales of these master builders sailing down the coast of Africa, establishing an outpost and constructing these magnificent stone cities, before mysteriously vanishing. Some even suggested it was built by ancient Arabs, or perhaps a lost white tribe that had wandered deep into the continent and died out, leaving behind only these silent stone witnesses. Literally, any explanation was considered more plausible than the simplest one, that the ancestors of the people living right there had built it. This wasn't just a simple mistake or a historical misinterpretation. It was a deliberate, motivated campaign to erase African history. Why go to such lengths? The answer is brutal and simple. Justification. To justify the colonial project, European powers needed a narrative. They pushed the idea of terra nullius, a Latin term meaning nobody's land. The argument was that Africa was an empty continent, devoid of history, culture, or civilization before the arrival of Europeans. It was a land waiting to be discovered, civilized, and, of course, exploited. A structure like Great Zimbabwe was a massive problem for this narrative. Its very existence was proof of a sophisticated, organized, and powerful African society. A society that had established a massive trading empire that stretched from the interior to the Swahili coast, trading gold and ivory for porcelain from China and beads from Persia. This wasn't an empty land. It was the seat of an empire that flourished between the 11th and 15th centuries, acknowledging that an indigenous African civilization could quarry, transport, and expertly assemble over 1 million stone blocks would completely shatter the myth of the uncivilized African who needed saving. It would expose the lie at the heart of colonialism. So, the lie had to be maintained. The colonial government of Rhodesia, the name given to the territory by British colonizers, actively suppressed the truth. Archaeologists who dared to suggest an African origin for Great Zimbabwe were discredited. Their funding was cut, and their findings were censored. Guidebooks at the site were legally required to omit any mention of its African origins. They spun a tale of mystery, of foreign builders, turning a proud national monument into an alien spectacle. This campaign of disinformation was so successful that for decades, the world believed the fantasy over the fact. It was a systematic effort to rob a people of their heritage, to tell them that the greatest achievements on their own land did not belong to them. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that the tide began to turn, thanks to the tireless work of honest archaeologists like Gertrude Katantasoon. In 1929, after extensive excavations, she stated unequivocally that the ruins were unquestionably African in every detail. Her work was initially dismissed, but the evidence was undeniable. Every artifact found, from pottery to iron tools, was consistent with local Shona culture. There was not a single shred of evidence for Phoenician, Arab, or any other foreign occupation. The architecture, while unique, had clear precedents in smaller stone-building traditions in the region. The truth was there all along, buried not just under layers of earth, but under layers of prejudice. When Zimbabwe finally gained its independence in 1980, it didn't just reclaim its land, it reclaimed its history. The new nation took its name from these very ruins. Zimbabwe means houses of stone in the Shona language. The iconic conical tower and the Zimbabwe bird, a soapstone sculpture found at the site, became powerful national symbols, printed on the new country's flag and currency. It was a defiant declaration to the world. This is ours. We built this. This is who we are. Today, Great Zimbabwe is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for what it truly is, the greatest ancient structure in sub-Saharan Africa and a monument to the ingenuity of the Shona people. But the story serves as a powerful and chilling reminder of how easily history can be manipulated. It shows us that archaeology is never just about digging up the past. It's also about the political and cultural battles that are fought over who gets to tell that past. The mystery of Great Zimbabwe was never about who built it. The real mystery was why the world tried so hard, for so long, to deny the truth. Imagine stepping back in time to the mid-1600s, to the stunning coastline of southern Africa. What do you see? If you were taught the old colonial version of history, you might picture a vast, empty landscape, waiting for European settlers to arrive and build a new world. But that picture is a myth, a powerful and destructive one. The truth is far more complex and fascinating. When the first Dutch ships, led by Jan van Riebeeck, dropped anchor in Table Bay in 1652, they didn't find an empty wilderness. They found a land that was already home to vibrant and sophisticated societies. The people who lived here, the Khoikhoi, were pastoralists, and their culture was deeply connected to the land and their livestock. For generations, they had managed the grazing lands around the Cape, moving their herds with the seasons in a delicate and sustainable balance with the environment. Their wealth wasn't measured in gold or silver, but in cattle. Large, magnificent herds of cattle were the cornerstone of their economy, their social structure, and their spiritual life. A person's status, their ability to marry, and their influence within the community were all tied to the number of cattle they owned. This wasn't a simple, primitive existence. It was a complex society with established political hierarchies, trade networks, and a rich oral tradition that stretched back centuries. The arrival of the Dutch wasn't the first time the Khoikhoi had encountered Europeans. For over a century before 1652, ships from Portugal, England, and the Netherlands had been stopping at the Cape to restock their supplies. A bustling trade had developed. European sailors, desperate for fresh meat after months at sea, would trade iron, copper, tobacco, and alcohol for the Khoikhoi's cattle. This relationship was often tense, marked by misunderstandings and occasional conflict, but it was fundamentally a relationship based on trade between two independent groups. The Khoikhoi were in control. They dictated the terms of trade, deciding when, where, and if they would exchange their precious livestock. They were the masters of this land. But with the establishment of a permanent settlement by the Dutch East India Company, although everything began to change. The initial goal was simple: create a refreshment station, a sort of 17th century service stop for ships on the long, grueling journey to Asia. Van Riebeeck and his small group of employees were supposed to grow vegetables, barter for cattle, and stay within the small area allocated to them. They were explicitly forbidden from enslaving the local people or seizing their land. However, the logic of colonialism soon took over. The settlement grew. The demand for resources, especially land and livestock, became insatiable. The Dutch settlers, many of whom were former company employees, released to become independent farmers or freeburgers, started to look beyond the initial fort. They saw the fertile grazing lands controlled by the Khoikhoi not as someone else's home, but as an opportunity for their own expansion. The Khoikhoi, of course, did not simply stand by and watch their world be dismantled. They were skilled negotiators and fierce warriors. Leaders like Dumont, a man who had actually traveled to the Dutch East Indies and learned the colonizers' language and intentions, recognized the existential threat they posed. He saw that the Dutch weren't just traders passing through. They were invaders who intended to stay and take everything. He began to organize resistance. Conflict was inevitable. The Dutch perspective was that they were improving unused land. But for the Khoikhoi, the land the Dutch were fencing off was their seasonal pasture, essential for the survival of their herds. When Khoikhoi herders tried to access their traditional grazing routes, they were met with fences and muskets. They resisted by raiding the new Dutch farms, taking back the cattle that had been traded and seizing the colonists' livestock. This spiraled into open warfare. The First Khoikhoi-Dutch War erupted in 1659. Dumont led a united force of several Khoikhoi clans in a campaign to drive the Dutch out. They used guerrilla tactics, attacking farms, disrupting supply lines, and avoiding direct, pitched battles where Dutch firearms would give them a decisive advantage. For a time, the colony was on the brink of collapse. The settlers were terrified, huddled behind the walls of their fort. But the Dutch had superior firepower and a ruthless determination. They eventually forced the Khoikhoi to the negotiating table. The peace that followed was a disaster for the Khoikhoi. The treaty effectively legitimized the Dutch theft of land. The company declared that the land had been won by the sword and was now rightfully theirs. This set a terrifying precedent. What had once been a partnership, however unequal, was now a relationship of conqueror and conquered. The cycle of dispossession and resistance continued for decades. More wars followed, but the Khoikhoi faced an enemy more deadly than any musket. The smallpox, introduced by European ships, swept through the Khoikhoi communities in devastating epidemics, particularly in 1730. Having no natural immunity, entire clans were wiped out. Some estimates suggest that up to 90% of the Khoikhoi population around the Cape perished. It was a demographic catastrophe on an unimaginable scale. The combination of war, the loss of their land, the collapse of their cattle-based economy, and the ravages of disease shattered Khoikhoi society. Survivors were often forced into dependency, becoming laborers on the very farms that now occupied their ancestral lands. Their independent way of life was destroyed. It is in the ashes of this destruction that the myth of the empty land was born. As the Khoikhoi presence on the landscape faded, colonial writers and officials began to rewrite history. It became convenient to forget the vibrant societies they had encountered. It was easier to pretend that the land had always been vacant, or at least sparsely inhabited by wandering, primitive nomads who had no real claim to it. This narrative known as the myth of Terra Nullius, or empty land, served a crucial political purpose. It justified the conquest. It transformed a violent invasion into a peaceful settlement. It erased the indigenous people from their own history and turned their dispossession into a footnote. This story claimed that the settlers were pioneers taming a wilderness, not conquerors displacing a people. This myth became the foundation of colonial history in South Africa. It was taught in schools, repeated in official documents, and embedded in the national consciousness for centuries. It was a powerful tool used to legitimize colonial rule and, later, the policies of apartheid, which were built on the idea of separating populations and allocating land based on race. But history has a way of resurfacing. Thanks to the work of archaeologists, historians, and the keepers of oral traditions, we can now piece together a much more accurate picture of the past. We know that the Cape was not empty. We know that the Khoikhoi fought bravely for their land and their way of life. And we know that the story of an empty land was a deliberate fabrication, a myth created to justify the unjust. Understanding this history is not just about correcting an old story. It's about acknowledging the deep roots of inequality and conflict that continue to shape Southern Africa today. The debates over land ownership, identity, and justice that are so prominent in the region are a direct legacy of this colonial encounter. By confronting the myth of the empty land, we can begin to understand the true history of the Cape's story of resilience, resistance, and the enduring spirit of a people who refused to be erased. Have you ever heard the story of a vast, empty land, just waiting for settlers to arrive and build a new world? It's a powerful image, a foundational myth for many nations. But what if that story, repeated for centuries, was a deliberate fiction? Today, we're peeling back the layers of one of the most persistent and damaging myths in history. The idea that Southern Africa was an empty land. For hundreds of years, a single narrative dominated the story of this region. It was a story told in the dusty journals of colonial administrators, in the earnest letters of missionaries, and in the official reports sent back to European capitals. They all painted a similar picture: a sprawling, sparsely populated wilderness, a terra nullius. Nobody's land. This wasn't just a casual observation. It became a cornerstone of colonial policy. Think about it. If you believe a land is empty, then your arrival isn't an invasion. It's a settlement. You're not a conqueror. You're a pioneer. You're not dispossessing anyone. You're taming the wilderness and bringing civilization to a void. This narrative was incredibly useful. It provided a moral and legal justification for taking land, for redrawing maps, and for building a new society from the ground up, all while ignoring the people who were already there. This idea didn't stay in the pages of old books. It was woven into the very fabric of society. It was taught in schools, becoming the unquestionable truth for generations of children. School textbooks depicted brave pioneers trekking into an unoccupied interior, conveniently omitting the complex societies, the trade networks, and the established communities they encountered. The myth of the empty land became an ideological weapon. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the system of apartheid. In South Africa, the apartheid government weaponized this myth to its fullest extent. Their official doctrine was that when the first white settlers arrived at the Cape in the 17th century, the interior of the country was largely uninhabited. They claimed that Bantu-speaking peoples, the ancestors of the majority of black South Africans, began migrating south around the same time. According to this twisted timeline, there was no initial conflict over land. It was a race to the interior, and both groups arrived simultaneously in a supposedly empty space. This historical fabrication was used to justify the creation of the Bantustans, or homelands, fragmented territories designated for black populations. The government argued they weren't taking land away. They were simply returning people to their ancestral areas. While the rest of the country, the vast, resource-rich Majorda, had been legitimately settled by whites, it was a lie built on a lie. A house of cards constructed to uphold a system of brutal segregation and inequality. But here's the thing about history. The truth has a way of leaving clues, like a detective story. You just need to know where to look. And for the past century, archaeologists, historians, linguists, and geneticists have been digging, uncovering a story that completely shatters the myth of the empty land. Let's start with the deep past. Southern Africa is, in fact, the cradle of humanity. Some of the oldest human remains have been found here. For tens of thousands of years, the San and Khoikhoi peoples thrived in this land. They were sophisticated hunter-gatherers and pastoralists, with rich cultures, intricate rock art that serves as a library of their beliefs, and a deep spiritual connection to the land. They were the first people. The land was never, ever empty. Then, we have the arrival of Bantu-speaking farmers. The apartheid myth claimed this happened around the 17th century, but archaeological evidence tells a completely different story. We have uncovered the remains of agricultural villages in the northern parts of South Africa that date back to as early as the 3rd century. That's more than 1,400 years before the first Dutch ship docked at the Cape. These were not simple, scattered tribes. By the year 1000 AD, complex societies were flourishing. Let's talk about Map. Located at the confluence of the Limpopo and Shash rivers, this was the capital of a prosperous kingdom around the 13th century. Archaeologists have unearthed a spectacular golden rhinoceros, intricate pottery, and glass beads from as far away as India and China. This was a center of international trade, a sophisticated, stratified society with a powerful elite. Mapungubwe existed centuries before European contact. It is undeniable proof of a thriving, organized civilization in a land that was supposedly empty. And it wasn't just Mapungubwe. Primeriale, all across the region, from the stone-walled settlements of the Highveld to the kingdom of Great Zimbabwe, just to the north. The evidence is overwhelming. These societies had advanced knowledge of metallurgy. They were skilled iron and copper workers. They were successful farmers who adapted their crops to the local environment. They managed large herds of cattle, which were a source of wealth and social status. They built extensive trade networks that connected the interior of the continent to the Indian Ocean and the wider world. So, why did the empty land myth persist for so long, even in the face of this evidence? Because it was politically convenient. It served the interests of those in power. Admitting the truth would mean admitting that colonization was an act of conquest. It would mean acknowledging that wealth was built on dispossession. It would mean recognizing that the entire colonial and apartheid project was based on a historical falsehood. Challenging this myth wasn't easy. For decades, scholars who presented this counter-narrative were often dismissed or sidelined. Their work was seen as political and subversive because it directly challenged the state's official story. But evidence is a stubborn thing. As more and more archaeological sites were excavated, as oral histories were painstakingly recorded, and as linguistic patterns were traced back through time, the mountain of proof became impossible to ignore. Today, the myth of the empty land has been thoroughly debunked in academic circles. The history books are being rewritten. Museums are changing their exhibits to reflect this more accurate, more complex story. Places like Mapungubwe are now UNESCO World Heritage Sites, recognized for their global significance. But the legacy of the myth lingers. Ideas that are taught for centuries don't just disappear overnight. They shape our perceptions, our politics, and our understanding of the present. The struggle over land and resources in southern Africa today is a direct consequence of this historical lie. Understanding where the lie came from is the first step toward addressing its consequences. The story of southern Africa is not one of an empty land. It is a story of continuous human presence for millennia. It's a story of innovation, adaptation, and cultural richness. It's a story of kingdoms that rose and fell, of trade routes that connected continents, and of people who built complex societies long before outsiders arrived. It's a story that was deliberately erased, and is now, finally, being History is never just about the past. It's about who we are today and the world we want to build for tomorrow. By dismantling myths like the empty land, we get closer to a more honest understanding of our shared human story. Have you ever heard the phrase, the empty land? It's a simple, yet powerful myth that has shaped the history of southern Africa for centuries. For a long time, the dominant narrative was that when European settlers arrived, they found a vast, uninhabited wilderness, a land waiting to be claimed, waiting to be civilized. This story, taught in schools and written in history books, justified colonization, dispossession, and the creation of systems like apartheid. But what if I told you that story is fundamentally wrong? What if the land wasn't empty at all? Today, we're going on a journey to uncover the real, vibrant history of Southern Africa. A story that was deliberately silenced and is now being brought back to life, thanks to the incredible work of historians, archaeologists, and storytellers. We're piecing together a past that is far richer and more complex than the empty land myth would have you believe. This isn't just about correcting a historical error. It's about restoring dignity, identity, and justice to millions. So, let's start at the very beginning. Who were the first people of this land? Long before any ships arrive on the horizon, Southern Africa was home to the Sand People. These were the original hunter-gatherers, masters of survival who lived in harmony with their environment for tens of thousands of years. Their legacy isn't written in grand monuments, but in something far more intimate and enduring. Rock art, all across the region, from the Drakensberg Mountains to the sea. Thousands of delicate paintings whisper stories of their spiritual beliefs, their daily lives, and their deep connection to the natural world. These are not just primitive drawings. They are a sophisticated library of human experience, one of the oldest artistic traditions on Earth. The San were the first storytellers, the first artists, the first people of this land. Then, about 2,000 years ago, a new group emerged. The Khoikhoi. They were pastoralists, herders of cattle and sheep. This was a revolutionary shift. Unlike the San, the Khoikhoi didn't just rely on what the land provided. They actively managed it. They followed seasonal grazing patterns, accumulating wealth and establishing more settled communities. Their arrival marked a new chapter in the region's economic and social development. When the first Europeans landed at the Cape, it was the Khoikhoi they encountered. They met societies with established leaders, complex trade networks, and a deep understanding of the land. The idea that this was an empty space was a deliberate fiction from the very start. But the story doesn't end there. Around the same time, another major migration was transforming the subcontinent. From the north, Bantu-speaking farmers began to move south, bringing with them incredible new technologies. They knew how to smelt iron, allowing them to forge stronger tools and weapons. They were skilled agriculturalists who cultivated crops like sorghum and millet, creating stable food supplies and enabling the growth of larger, more permanent villages. These were not random wanderers. They were pioneers who built sophisticated societies. Archaeologists have unearthed the remains of their settlements, complete with intricate pottery, iron-forged nosses, and evidence of extensive trade. They traded gold, ivory, and other goods, connecting southern Africa to a vast network that stretched across the Indian Ocean. This wave of innovation and settlement led to the rise of incredible kingdoms, civilizations that rivaled any in the world at the time. Forget the myth of a primitive, undeveloped land. Think of the kingdom of Mapungubwe, which flourished around the year 1220. Located at the confluence of the Limpopo and Shash rivers, this was southern Africa's first state. Its people were master goldsmiths, creating exquisite objects like the famous golden rhinoceros, a symbol of royal power and artistic genius. Mapungubwe was a bustling center of international trade, a cosmopolitan society that was wealthy, powerful, and highly organized. Its kings sat atop Mapungubwe Hill, physically separated from the commoners below, a clear sign of a complex, stratified society. And after Mapungubwe came its successor, the legendary Great Zimbabwe. This magnificent stone city, built without any mortars, stands as a testament to the architectural and engineering prowess of the Shona people. The Great Enclosure, with its massive, curving walls, is one of the most awe-inspiring ancient structures in the world. This was the capital of a vast empire that controlled trade routes and commanded immense wealth for over 300 years. These were not isolated tribes. They were powerful kingdoms, centers of culture, commerce, and innovation. They were the true architects of Southern African civilization. So, if all of this history was here, if the land was teeming with people, cultures, and kingdoms, why did the empty land myth take hold? The answer is simple and brutal. It was a tool of conquest. To justify taking land, you first have to erase the people who live on it. By portraying Southern Africa as a vacant, ownerless territory, terra nullius, in Leo terms colonizers could claim it without acknowledging the rights of the San, the Khoikhoi, and the Bantu-speaking farmers and kingdoms who had been there for centuries. even millennia. History was rewritten to serve a political agenda. The rich tapestry of the past was bleached into a blank canvas, ready to be painted over by a new, colonial story. This erasure had devastating consequences that we still live with today. When you erase a people's history, you erase their claim to the land. You erase their identity. You erase their rights. The struggle for land inequality in modern South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Namibia is directly linked to this historical lie. The myth of the empty land isn't just a quaint old story. It's a living injustice that continues to affect politics, land distribution, and social identity. That's why rewriting this history is so crucial. It's an act of restoration. It's about giving voice to the voiceless and putting people back into the landscape from which they were violently removed. When archaeologists unearth an ancient settlement, they're not just digging up pottery and bones. They're uncovering evidence of life, of community, of ownership. When historians decode rock art or study oral traditions, they are recovering lost languages and forgotten worldviews. They are challenging a lie that has lasted for far too long. The truth is simple. Southern Africa was never empty. It was full of life, full of innovation, full of culture, full of history. From the ancient footprints of the sand to the great stone walls of Zimbabwe, the evidence is all around us, etched into the very soil of the continent. The myth of the empty land is finally collapsing under the weight of this undeniable truth. But myths don't disappear. They linger in our memories, in our politics, and in how we see ourselves and each other. The work of reclaiming this history belongs to all of us. It means questioning the stories we've been told, seeking out new perspectives, and listening to the voices that were once silenced. Understanding the real history of this land is not just an academic exercise. It is a fundamental step toward justice, reconciliation, and building a more equitable future. Because a future built on truth is always stronger than one built on a lie. The real story of Southern Africa is finally being told, and it's a story we all need to hear. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Listen to the wind as it whispers through the trees. Can you hear it? Can you feel it? The land remembers. This ground we walk on, this earth that sustains us, holds stories deeper than any history book. It holds memories etched into its very soul. The rivers remember, too. They flow with the echoes of ancient songs, their currents carrying tales of seasons, of journeys, of life lived along their banks for millennia. And the stones, silent and steadfast, they remain bare. They've been here through it all, witnessing the rise and fall of countless suns, the passing of generations, the first footprints on a trail, long before the first European ships scarred the horizon, before strange flags were planted in the soil, before maps were drawn by foreign hands, redrawing a world that was already whole. This land was home. It was never empty. It was never a void waiting to be filled. It was vibrant, teeming with nations, wheat cultures with languages as diverse as the landscapes themselves. From the frozen north to the sun-drenched south, people lived here. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. They were astronomers, charting the stars to guide their calendars and their ceremonies. They were engineers, building intricate cities and complex irrigation systems that rivaled any in the world. They were artists, weaving stories into textiles, carving meaning into wood and stone. They were philosophers, with profound understandings of the cosmos, of life, and of our interconnectedness with everything that exists. Think about the daily rhythms of that life. Imagine waking to the same sun, but seeing a world untouched by the shadows of what was to come. Here, communities cultivated the earth with a wisdom passed down through generations. They understood the soil, the rain, the delicate balance of giving and taking. Fields of corn beans and squashta. Three sisters grew in harmony, a perfect model of sustainable agriculture that modern science is only now beginning to fully appreciate. This was not a wilderness to be conquered. It was a garden to be tended. They didn't just farm for subsistence. They farmed for community, for ceremony, for the future. Trade routes crisscrossed the continent like a great, invisible web. Shells from the coast would find their way thousands of miles inland. Obsidian from volcanic mountains was shaped into tools and art far from its origin. Copper from the Great Lakes was traded down the Mississippi. These weren't just economic transactions. They were social and cultural bonds. Each exchange was a conversation, a sharing of ideas, of technologies, of stories. These networks connected hundreds of distinct nations, creating a rich tapestry of interaction and mutual respect long before the idea of a global economy was ever conceived. And more than anything, they dreamed. They dreamed of a good life for their children. They dreamed of peace with their neighbors. They looked to the sky and dreamed of the Creator. They told stories around the fire, stories of how the world came to be, stories of trickster coyotes and wise grandmothers, stories that taught morals, ethics, and one's place in the universe. Their dreams were woven into the fabric of their daily lives, into their songs, their dances, their art. This land was filled with the dreams of millions, dreams that soaked into the earth and became part of its memory. Then came the ships, and with the ships came a story, a dangerous and persistent myth. The myth of Terra Nullius, the myth of empty land. It was a narrative created to justify conquest, to erase the existence of the people who were already here. History books were written that began with the arrival of colonists, as if time itself started when their ships landed. The vibrant, complex societies were dismissed as primitive, their profound spiritual beliefs as superstition, their land ownership as non-existent. The people were rendered invisible, their history silenced. This narrative claimed the land was a wild, untamed frontier waiting for civilization. But the land itself knew the truth. The rivers knew, the stones knew. To claim a land is empty when it is full of people, full of history, full of dreams, is an act of profound violence. It's an attempt to erase memory itself. For centuries, this erasure was state-sanctioned policy. Children were taken from their families and sent to schools where their languages were forbidden, their cultures stripped away, sacred sites were desecrated, treaties were broken, and the very connection between people and their ancestral lands was severed. The silence that fell was a heavy one, a silence born of pain, loss, and the overwhelming weight of a story that denied your very existence. But history has a way of speaking again. Memory, once buried, can never be truly extinguished. It lingers in the soil, it flows in the water, it waits patiently in the stone. And now, the silence is breaking. All across the continent, a great resurgence is happening. Indigenous voices, once suppressed, are rising with a power and clarity that cannot be ignored. Archaeologists are uncovering evidence that pushes back the timeline of human presence here by thousands of years, confirming what oral traditions have said all along. Scientists are studying traditional ecological knowledge, realizing that these ancient practices hold the keys to solving modern environmental crises. Artists, poets, and filmmakers are telling their own stories, in their own words, reclaiming the narrative and challenging the colonial myths. Language revitalization programs are breathing new life into ancient tongues, each word a reclamation of identity and worldview. Young people are learning the songs, the dances, and the ceremonies of their ancestors, connecting with a lineage that was never truly broken. They are standing up, speaking out, and demanding that the true history of this land be told. They are reminding the world that they are still here. They have always been here, and they will always be here. The land is speaking through them. The rivers are singing with them. The stones are bearing witness to their resilience. Listening to these voices isn't just about correcting the historical record. It's about understanding the present and building a more just future. It's about recognizing that the story of this land did not begin in 1492. It's a story that is ancient, complex, and continuous. It's a story of profound loss, but also of incredible strength, survival, and renewal. When we acknowledge this deeper history, we begin to see the world differently. The park down the street is no longer just a park. It's ancestral land with a name and a story. The river flowing through the city is not just a waterway. It's a sacred artery that has sustained life for eons. We start to understand that we are all part of a much longer story, and that we have a responsibility to be good stewards of the land and good relatives to one another. The silence is broken. Now it is our job to listen, to learn, to amplify these voices and to ensure that this history is never silenced again. Because the land remembers, and it is time for all of us to remember with it. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please share it and continue to seek out and listen to the indigenous voices and storytellers who are sharing their truths. Follow for more stories that challenge the way we see our world.